Ever felt like you were winning but also losing at the same time? Or like the harder you try to be happy, the worse you feel? What if I told you that logic itself can get trapped in a loop? You think you know how the world works, but there are certain ideas, certain paradoxes that will completely break your brain and then put it back together a little wiser. Stay right there because what you're about to see isn't just a mind game. It's a blueprint for a life where the opposite of what you think is true is actually the answer. What's up, everyone? You've come to the right place if you like having your mind blown. We're diving deep into the weirdest, most frustrating, and most life-changing concepts in the universe, paradoxes. We're talking about puzzles that have stumped the smartest people who ever lived, ideas so simple they sound silly, but so deep that they shatter the rules of logic, science, and even common sense. We're going to explore 14 of these mind-benders, and I promise you, by the end of this, you'll look at everything differently. Your friendships, your choices, your job, and maybe even your own existence. Get ready. This is where the simple truth is actually the most confusing lie. The biggest problem we face is a simple one. We think life is linear. We think A leads to B. We think saving money is always good. We think more choices are always better. We think, in a giant, old universe, the night sky should be fully lit up with stars. But the world is not a straight line. It's a loop. It's a contradiction. It's a paradox. The challenge is to stop thinking of life as a simple equation you can solve. The challenge is to stop trusting your gut on these 14 scenarios and start embracing the idea that two opposite things can be true at once. If we can solve the paradoxes, we can solve the weird, confusing problems in our own lives. It's time to face the first one, a simple thought experiment that proves that an unstoppable force really can meet an immovable object, and the result is a total collapse of logic. Imagine a street vendor showing off his gear. He picks up a sword and shouts, "This sword, so sharp it can cut through anything." He swings it with a flourish. Then he reaches for a shield, holding it up proudly. "And this shield, so strong it can block any attack." Now, a kid in the crowd pipes up and asks the question that crashes the whole show. What happens when your sword strikes your shield? The merchant, and by extension, our entire logical world freezes. What's the answer? If the sword cuts through the shield, then the shield was clearly not able to block any attack, so the merchant lied about the shield. But if the shield blocks the sword, then the sword was clearly not able to cut through anything. So the merchant lied about the sword. You see the trap? Both claims are absolutes. They use the word anything, and in a world where two absolutes meet, the whole system breaks. This paradox isn't just about sharp blades and strong metal. It's about the danger of absolute statements in the real world. Think about politics or even a simple fight with a friend. When you say, "You always do this," or "You never listen," you're creating a sword and shield paradox. You're setting up a claim that is so total and so final that the moment it meets a contradictory absolute, the argument becomes unsolvable and the logic breaks down. I'll be honest with you, I used to be the king of absolute statements. In my early 20s, I ruined a friendship because I told someone, "You never follow through on anything." The second those words left my mouth, I saw their face change. They went from open and apologetic to defensive and closed off. Why? Because I had just painted them into a corner with no escape. Even if they changed right then and there, even if they proved me wrong the very next day, I had already declared that they never did anything right. I had made improvement impossible in their mind. That friendship ended not because of the actual issue, missed plans, forgotten promises, but because I had wielded an absolute like a weapon. I learned the hard way that the moment you use words like always or never, you're not trying to solve a problem. You're trying to win an argument. And winning that way means losing the relationship. The lesson here is simple but life-changing. The world is built on nuance, not absolutes. When you hear someone use the word always or never or anything, remember the sword and shield. It's a warning sign that the statement is likely an oversimplification, a claim that can't possibly stand up to reality. Because in reality, every shield has a weak point, and every sword can be stopped. The only winning move is to step away from the absolute claims and embrace the messy, gray, complicated truth. But here's what's wild. If absolute statements break down so easily in conversation, why do they dominate our laws, our contracts, and even our sense of right and wrong? What happens when an entire justice system is built on the idea of reasonable doubt, another vague, impossible to define absolute? Hold that thought, because the next paradox turns this idea of broken logic into a life-or-death game with a crocodile. Let's move from a sword fight to a life-or-death scenario with a cold-blooded killer. This is an ancient logical puzzle, simple on the surface, but a total nightmare to solve. Imagine you're standing at the river's edge. A crocodile has snatched your child. Your heart is pounding. The crocodile looks at you with those cold, dead eyes and makes a deal. It says, "I will return your child if and only if you can correctly guess what I will do next." You have to guess, will the crocodile return your child or keep your child? The minute you try to answer, you realize you're in a logical prison. Let's try both possible guesses and see what happens. Scenario A. You guess you will return the child. Well, if the crocodile planned to return the child, your guess is correct. The crocodile follows the rules and returns the child. Everything is fine. Logic holds. If the crocodile planned to keep the child, your guess is wrong. The crocodile follows the rules and keeps the child. Everything is fine. Logic holds. Scenario B. You guess you will not return the child. Well, if the crocodile planned to keep the child, your guess is correct. But because the deal says the crocodile must return the child if the guess is correct, the crocodile is now forced to do the opposite of what it planned. It must keep the child, but the deal forces it to return the child. Contradiction. If the crocodile planned to return the child, your guess is wrong. The crocodile is not forced to return the child, but since it planned to return the child, it does anyway. The outcome is the same, the child is returned, but the logic is weirdly strained. The only way the crocodile's deal works is if you guess that it will not return the child and it plans to keep the child, but then it must return the child to honor the deal. The crocodile is trapped by its own logic, forced into a contradiction. It can't both keep the child, as planned, and honor the deal by returning the child. This is a self-referential paradox like the famous liar's paradox. This sentence is false. It's a deal that collapses under its own weight. The rule itself creates an impossible situation. Here's where this gets real. In 2019, I was helping a friend navigate a nightmare with their health insurance company. They had been paying premiums for years, never missing a payment. Then they got sick, really sick, and filed a claim. The insurance company denied it, citing a clause that said they wouldn't cover pre-existing conditions. But here's the catch. The condition was only diagnosed after they got the insurance. The company argued that because the condition existed in their body before the diagnosis, it was pre-existing. My friend appealed. The insurance company said, "We'll approve your claim if you can prove the condition didn't exist before you got insurance." But proving something didn't exist is logically impossible. You can't prove a negative. You can't produce evidence of nothing. It was the crocodile paradox in corporate form. The rule was designed to sound fair, just prove your case, but the proof required was impossible by definition. The game was rigged from the start. We eventually won, but only by hiring a lawyer who stopped playing by their rules and threatened legal action. The moment we stepped outside their logical trap, the power shifted. The big takeaway here is that some contracts, agreements, or promises are flawed from the start. They have an internal contradiction. Think about political promises that are mutually exclusive, or legal contracts filled with loopholes that make the whole thing unworkable. The crocodile represents a system of authority that rigs the rules to maintain control, guaranteeing a contradiction so that it never has to honor its promise. The real answer isn't to solve the riddle, it's to realize you're in a trap. The minute you recognize the deal is flawed, the power dynamic shifts. You can't win the game, but you can point out that the game is unplayable. Now, if logical traps can be weaponized by insurance companies and ancient crocodiles, what about the traps we set for ourselves? What if the biggest lie you tell yourself every single day is the one thing stopping you from being happy? Because the next paradox reveals why chasing happiness is the surest way to never find it. Now for a paradox that touches everyone's daily life. We all want to be happy, right? Hedonism is the idea that pleasure is the ultimate goal in life. So it makes perfect sense that the best way to live is to constantly seek out maximum pleasure. But here's the paradox. The harder you chase happiness, the further away it gets. Think about the last time you were really trying to have a good time. Maybe you went to a party, and all night long you kept thinking, am I having fun yet? Is this the best time? Should I be enjoying this more? The second you start asking those questions, you've lost. Happiness is a byproduct of other activities, not something you can grab directly. When you make pleasure your primary goal, you become hyper-aware of your own feelings, and you start judging the moment. This self-awareness creates pressure and anxiety. You're no longer doing the activity, you're analyzing your happiness during the activity. You're not enjoying the sunset. You're thinking, this sunset isn't making me as happy as I thought it would. You're not relaxing on vacation. You're scrolling through social media, wondering if your friends are having a better time on their vacations. The irony is that true joy shows up when you are completely immersed in something else, when you are so focused on a hobby, a conversation, a task, or a deep sense of purpose that you forget to check your happiness meter. Think of happiness like a butterfly. If you've ever tried to catch a butterfly, you know the harder you chase it, the faster it flies away. You run after it, arms outstretched, and it dances just out of reach, always one flutter ahead of your grasp. But if you sit down quietly in the grass, if you stop chasing and just exist peacefully in the garden, focused on the flowers, the sun, the book in your lap, the butterfly lands on your shoulder. It comes to you when you're not looking for it. That's happiness. It's not a target you hunt down with single-minded determination. It's a butterfly that lands on you when you're busy living a life of meaning, connection, and flow. As the psychiatrist Viktor Frankl said, happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue. The paradox teaches us to stop chasing the feeling and start chasing the meaning. Stop asking, what will make me happy, and start asking, what is a worthwhile activity that I can fully immerse myself in? When you focus on purpose, growth, connection, and creation, you get a surprise gift. Happiness shows up when you weren't looking for it. The moment you let go of the need to be happy, you create the space for real joy to actually sneak up on you. But if chasing happiness directly makes it run away, what about choices? We're told more freedom equals more happiness, right? More options, more control, more power. So why do we feel more paralyzed than ever when we open Netflix and see 10,000 titles? Why does the ice cream shop with 70 flavors make us miserable? Let me show you how freedom became a prison. On a related note, let's talk about one of the core ideas of modern life: freedom of choice. We are told that more options equal more freedom, and more freedom equals more happiness. Sounds right, doesn't it? Then you walk into the grocery store for a jar of jam, and you see 50 different kinds. You walk into the ice cream parlor, and there are 70 flavors. Or you sit down on your couch to watch a movie, and the streaming menu has 10,000 titles. The paradox is this: while having some choice is good, having too many choices makes us paralyzed, anxious, and ultimately less satisfied with the choices we do make. The psychologist Barry Schwartz popularized this idea. He argued that too many options lead to two major problems. One, decision paralysis. You spend so much time looking at all the options, the 10,000 movies on Netflix, that you can't pick one, and you end up rewatching The Office for the 5th time, or you just give up and go to bed. The sheer effort of choosing leaves you drained, a state called decision fatigue.
2. Post-decision regret, or the opportunity cost. You finally pick that salted caramel ice cream, but as you eat it, you can't stop thinking about the 69 other flavors you didn't pick. Your brain is running a simulation of what you might have missed. Even if the salted caramel is delicious, your enjoyment is diminished by the nagging thought of the pistachio, the mango, or the rocky road. The key villain here is the opportunity cost. When you only have 3 options, missing out on 2 others feels small. When you have 100 options, the cost of the 99 you didn't pick feels enormous. It raises your expectations to an impossible level. If there are 50 ice cream flavors, you expect the one you choose to be perfect. And if it's merely great, you feel disappointed because it wasn't perfect. Let me tell you about the worst decision I never made. After college, I was drowning in possibilities. I could go into marketing, teaching, finance, tech, journalism, nonprofit work, or start my own business. Every path looked promising. Every path had people who were successful and happy. I spent 6 months researching. I made spreadsheets. I took personality tests. I interviewed people in each field. And you know what happened? I became completely paralyzed. I couldn't choose because I was terrified that whichever path I picked, I'd be abandoning the other 5 perfect careers. The opportunity cost was crushing me. I was literally choosing nothing because I couldn't choose everything. It wasn't until a mentor sat me down and said, "Pick the one that's good enough and then make it great through your effort," that I finally moved forward. I stopped trying to maximize and started trying to satisfy. I picked a path that met my basic criteria: interesting work, decent pay, room for growth, and I committed. And here's the twist. Within a year, I had completely changed what that job looked like. I had shaped it, molded it, made it mine. The perfect career I was searching for didn't exist out there in the world. It was something I built with my own hands once I stopped searching and started doing. The way out of this trap is to become a satisfier instead of a maximizer. A maximizer is someone who feels they must find the absolute best option, which leads to endless research, stress, and regret. A satisfier is someone who aims for good enough. They make a choice that meets their standards and then stop looking. They're often happier because they don't waste energy obsessing over the choices they didn't make. In a world that constantly bombards us with unlimited options, the paradox of choice is a powerful call to simplify. The freedom you seek isn't found in a catalog of endless possibilities. It's found in the clarity and peace of mind that comes from choosing good enough and being content with it. Less truly is more. So we've established that more choices make us miserable. But what about more friends? Surely having a huge social network is always better, right? Well, buckle up, because math is about to prove that your friends are statistically more popular than you, and it's not your fault. In fact, it's nobody's fault. It's just math. And it explains why social media makes you feel like everyone's life is better than yours. Now here's a paradox that will either make you feel better about yourself or confirm your worst high school fears. It's called the friendship paradox, and it's a mathematical phenomenon that explains why your friends seem to have more friends than you do. And here's the kicker. It's not just in your head. It's a statistical certainty. How is this possible? Let's think about it logically. Imagine a room full of people. Some people, let's call them the social butterflies, have 100 friends. Other people, let's call them the quiet types, have 2 friends. If you were to randomly pick a person in that room, the probability of them being one of the social butterflies is much, much higher than them being one of the quiet types. Why? Because the social butterflies have 100 connection points, 100 friends, and the quiet types only have 2 connection points. You are far more likely to be a friend of someone who has a large number of friends. This means that when you look at the people you call your friends, you're statistically biased toward people who are more popular than the average person in the network. Your friends, on average, are going to have a higher than average number of connections. The paradox has nothing to do with how cool you are. It's just how networks work. The popular people act as hubs, and you're more likely to be connected to a hub than to another smaller node. Think of social networks like an airline route map. You're a small regional airport. Let's say you're Boise, Idaho. You have a handful of direct flights, maybe to Salt Lake City, Seattle, and Denver. Now look at your connections: Salt Lake, Seattle, Denver. These are hub cities. They each have hundreds of flights going everywhere. So when you look at your friends, your direct connections, they all seem way more connected than you are. But here's the thing. Most of the airports in the network are like you, small regional spots with just a few connections. It's just that those few connections happen to link to the massive hubs. You're comparing yourself to O'Hare and LAX when you should be comparing yourself to all the other Boise's out there. This paradox is incredibly relevant in the age of social media. When you scroll through Instagram or Facebook, whose life are you seeing? You're primarily seeing the curated highlights of your most connected friends, the hubs. This creates the illusion that everyone else is more successful, more popular, or having more fun than you are. The friendship paradox is the mathematical explanation for why you feel left out. You're comparing yourself to the top 10% of the network, which, by definition, is an unfair comparison. The takeaway isn't to ditch your friends, it's to understand that your perception is skewed. The paradox is even used in public health to find the most influential people in a community to help spread public health messages or identify the start of an outbreak. The real lesson is to stop comparing your life to the statistically enhanced highlight reels of your most popular connections. The true measure of a network isn't the number of friends, but the quality, depth, and meaning of the few you have. Speaking of comparing ourselves to impossible standards, let's talk about words. Because language itself is built on a paradox so fundamental that it's been breaking philosophers' brains for 2,500 years. When does a pile of sand stop being a pile? When does a rich person become poor? When does a hero become a villain? The answer will make you question every label you've ever used.
This next one is ancient and simple, but it attacks the very foundation of how we use language to describe the world. It's the Sorites paradox, and it's all about when something becomes something else. The name comes from the Greek word soros, meaning heap. The question is this: how many grains of sand do you need to make a heap? Is 1 grain of sand a heap? No. Is 2 grains of sand a heap? No. If you agree that 1 is not a heap, and you agree that adding 1 grain to a non-heap does not suddenly transform it into a heap, then logically, no number of grains can ever form a heap. This is the logical trap. If there's no definite point where not a heap becomes a heap, then the word heap is meaningless. But we use the word heap all the time, and everyone knows what we mean. The paradox works on any vague concept that relies on a gradual change. At what precise moment does a person with thinning hair become bald? Is it 100,000 hairs? 50,000? 49,999? At what precise dollar amount does a person go from poor to rich? At what precise temperature change does the environment go from fine to a climate crisis? At what precise moment does a good person become evil? The paradox shows that the language we use every day, words like heap, bald, rich, crisis, evil, hero, are incredibly useful, but they are also fundamentally imprecise. They don't have hard, clear boundaries. I need to tell you something personal. For years, I struggled with my weight. Not dramatically, I wasn't dangerously overweight, but enough that I was uncomfortable, enough that I avoided mirrors, enough that I made jokes about it before anyone else could. The question that haunted me was, am I fat? One day I weighed 185 pounds and felt okay about myself. The next week I weighed 187. Was that the line? Had I crossed over from normal to fat? What about 190, 195, 200? I would obsess over this boundary, this invisible line in the sand that would determine my worth, my attractiveness, my identity. But the line never appeared. It was a gradient, a slow fade, a heap of grains I couldn't count. The Sorites paradox taught me something profound. I was torturing myself over a category that didn't exist.
Fat wasn't a discrete state I suddenly entered like walking through a door. It was a vague, socially constructed label that had no objective definition. The moment I stopped trying to find the line, the moment I stopped asking, am I fat, and started asking, am I healthy? Am I strong? Am I treating my body with respect? The whole game changed. I realized the power wasn't in the label, it was in rejecting the tyranny of the label altogether. This has huge real-world implications, especially in law and ethics, which rely on vague concepts like reasonable doubt or excessive force. The system is forced to draw a line in the sand, sometimes literally, where no clear logical line exists. The Sorites paradox is a lesson in embracing the gray area. It reminds us that our search for clarity and neat categories in a messy, ambiguous world is often a fool's errand. True understanding comes not from finding the perfect, precise definition of a heap, but from recognizing that a heap is a context-dependent, gradual idea. Sometimes the answer isn't a hard line. It's the understanding that the boundary is constantly shifting. If the labels we use are fundamentally imprecise, what about identity itself? What makes you, you? Is it your body? Your memories? Your personality? Because the ancient Greeks asked this question about a ship, and the answer will completely redefine how you think about change, growth, and the person you see in the mirror.
This is one of the oldest and most profound paradoxes, asked by the ancient Greeks, and it challenges the very nature of identity. Imagine the ship of Theseus docked in a harbor. Over decades of service, its wooden planks rot and wear out. The crew slowly replaces them one by one. First a few planks, then a mast, then the rudder. Eventually, every single part of the original ship has been replaced. The question is the ship still the ship of Theseus? You can argue it both ways, and both arguments sound right. Argument for no: since none of the original matter remains, not a single splinter of wood, it cannot logically be the same ship. It's a new ship built from new materials. Argument for yes: it has had a continuous history. It's sailed under the same name, been manned by the same crew, and performed the same function the whole time. It has continuous identity. Now, let's make it worse. What if someone gathered all the old, discarded planks and used them to build a second ship? Now we have two ships. Which one is the real ship of Theseus? The one with the continuous history, or the one made of the continuous original material? This is not a riddle about ships. It's a metaphor for life. I have to share something that makes this paradox unbearably real for me. My mother was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's 3 years ago. If you've never experienced this disease with someone you love, let me tell you what it does. It replaces the planks of a person while they're still sailing. Month by month, I watch pieces of her disappear. The jokes she used to tell, gone. The recipes she knew by heart, forgotten. The stories about my childhood that shaped my understanding of who I am, erased. Every time I visit, I ask myself the ship of Theseus question in the most painful way possible. Is this still my mother? The woman sitting in front of me has her face, her voice, her body, but the personality, the memories, the essence of who she was, these are being replaced plank by plank with confusion, repetition, and blank stares. And yet sometimes she laughs at something silly, and I hear the same laugh I heard as a child. Sometimes she looks at me with such pure love that I know somewhere deep in the hull of that ship, the original vessel still exists. The ship of Theseus isn't just a philosophical puzzle for me. It's a daily meditation on what it means to love someone who is becoming someone else. Is she still my mother if she doesn't remember being my mother? Is identity stored in matter or memory or something more fundamental, something like the shape of a soul that persists even when everything else changes? Think about yourself. Every cell in your body is constantly dying and regenerating. After about 7 years, almost every cell you were born with is gone. You are a completely new collection of atoms, but you are still you. So, what is the constant? Is it your memories, like the ship's continuous history? Is it your personality? Is it a deep, intangible soul or essence? The paradox shows us that identity is fluid, not fixed. It's a tension between the parts and the whole. When you look back at your younger self, the one who made those embarrassing choices, who had those completely different beliefs, are they the same person as the you today? The ship of Theseus reminds us that change doesn't erase what was. It builds upon it. The identity is the continuous process of change, not the material at any given moment. The profound lesson is that you don't have to hold on to the past to be the same person. You are a story, a process, a journey, a continuously updated model that carries the spirit of the original while shedding the old, rotting parts. And that is a beautiful way to think about personal growth. So, identity is fluid, labels are vague, and change is constant. But what about the systems we live in? The rules, the bureaucracies, the structures that claim to protect us? Because the next paradox reveals how those systems use logic itself as a weapon, creating inescapable loops that keep you trapped. And once you see it, you'll recognize it everywhere. If you've ever dealt with a big company's customer service, a government agency's paperwork, or a ridiculous rule at work, you've experienced a catch-22. The term comes from Joseph Heller's novel about World War II, and the classic example is about a bomber pilot trying to get out of flying dangerous missions. The rule says the only way for a pilot to be excused from flying missions is to prove he is insane. Now for the trap. A soldier goes to the doctor and says, "I'm insane. I want out." 1. If a pilot says he is insane to avoid dangerous missions, he is showing rational concern for his own safety. A rational person is, by definition, sane, therefore he must keep flying. 2. If he keeps flying dangerous missions, he must be insane to willingly risk his life. But since he never asked to be excused, he is considered sane by the rule and he must keep flying. There is no way out. The rule itself creates a closed, self-defeating loop. Think about real-world catch-22s. Job hunting. You need years of experience to get the job, but you need the job to get the experience. Credit. You need a credit history to get a loan, but you need a loan to build a credit history. A simple fix. You need permission from Department A to get the forms for Department B, but Department A won't give you permission without a signature from Department B. Mental health. You need to call during business hours to schedule a therapy appointment, but you can't take time off work without a doctor's note, and you can't get a doctor's note without an appointment. Let me tell you about my friend Marcus. He's from Nigeria, and he wanted to come study in the United States. The American embassy told him he needed to prove 2 contradictory things simultaneously. 1, prove you have strong ties to your home country, so they know you'll go back after your studies. 2, prove you have the ability and intent to stay in the U.S. for years to complete your degree. Do you see the trap? If he demonstrated too much connection to Nigeria, family business, property, job prospects, they'd question why he needed to study abroad. If he demonstrated too much connection to the U.S., job offers, housing plans, American contacts, they'd deny him for being a flight risk who might overstay his visa. He couldn't win. The system was designed to find a reason to say no. He eventually got through, but only because he hired an immigration lawyer who knew exactly how to thread the needle of this impossible contradiction. But here's the thing. Most people can't afford that lawyer.
Most people just get trapped in the loop and give up. The catch-22 is a perfect example of how logic can be used to create traps. It shows how systems, especially large, unfeeling bureaucracies, can use arbitrary, self-contradictory rules not to solve a problem, but to maintain control and keep the little guys stuck. The only way to solve a catch-22 is to stop playing by the rules. You can't appeal to the logic of the system because the logic is what's broken. You have to step outside the loop, find a workaround, or simply refuse to engage. Recognize the absurdity, laugh at the brokenness, and then focus your energy on finding a door that the rule makers didn't see. We've seen how human systems trap us with broken logic. But what if reality itself, the actual fabric of the universe, operates on rules that are equally insane? What if, at the quantum level, something can be two opposite things at the exact same time? Dead and alive, here and there, real and not real. Welcome to the world where observation creates reality.
We've talked about logical and social paradoxes. Now let's dive into physics for a minute, because this is where reality itself gets weird. This thought experiment was created by the physicist Erwin Schrödinger to show how bizarre he thought the rules of quantum mechanics were. The scenario: a cat is placed in a steel box with a tiny amount of radioactive material, a Geiger counter, and a vial of poison. There's a 50-50 chance the material will decay. If the material decays, the Geiger counter detects it, the vial breaks, and the cat dies. If the material doesn't decay, the vial stays closed, and the cat lives. The rules of quantum mechanics, the physics of the tiny world of atoms, say that until you open the box and observe it, the radioactive material is in a state of superposition, meaning it has both decayed and not decayed at the same time. The ultimate question is, what state is the cat in before you open the box? If the cat's fate is tied to the atom state, then the cat too must be in a state of superposition. It is simultaneously both alive and dead. This seems crazy because in the everyday world, something is either this or that. A light is either on or off. A door is either open or closed. A cat is either breathing or not breathing. Schrödinger created this thought experiment to show the absurdity of applying the rules of the subatomic world, where superposition is normal, to the world of big, everyday objects like cats. The paradox is all about the act of observation. It suggests that reality, at its deepest level, is not fixed until a consciousness, you, opening the box, forces it into a single definite state. The act of looking collapses the wave function and chooses one reality over the other. Think about this in terms of something we all experience: uncertainty in relationships. Imagine you sent a risky text message to someone you care about. Maybe you confessed your feelings, or you apologized for a fight, or you asked them on a date. The message shows delivered, but they haven't responded yet. In that moment, before you see their reply, your relationship exists in superposition. They simultaneously like you and don't like you. They're simultaneously angry and forgiving. They simultaneously want to see you and never want to see you again. All possible futures exist at once. It's only when you open their response, when you observe the outcome, that reality collapses into one specific path. Before that moment, you literally exist in multiple relationship states at the same time. The anxiety you feel is your consciousness trying to hold all those contradictory possibilities in your mind at once. Schrödinger's cat is that feeling, but with life and death instead of love and rejection. This paradox challenges our most basic assumptions about reality. Does reality exist independently of us? Do we, by observing, create the reality we see?
While scientists have various ways of interpreting this, the profound lesson is about potential. Before you open the box, all possibilities exist. It's only by taking action, by making an observation, or by making a choice, that you collapse those possibilities into a single fixed reality. The universe holds all the options, alive and dead, yes and no, until your consciousness makes the final decision. It's a powerful reminder that your focus and attention have a measurable impact on the world around you. If observation can collapse infinite possibilities into a single reality, what happens when we try to work with actual infinity? Not the metaphorical kind, but the mathematical kind. The kind where a hotel can be completely full and still have room for infinite new guests. Ready to have your brain shattered by the grand hotel?
Let's move on to the world of math. But don't worry, this one is not about something that is so mind-bending, it's almost poetic. It's the Grand Hotel Paradox, created by mathematician David Hilbert, and it shows you how weird infinity really is. Imagine a hotel called the Grand Hotel. It has an infinite number of rooms, numbered forever. And here's the kicker. Every single room is full. Every single one. A new traveler shows up at the front desk and asks for a room. 1, 2, 3, and so on. In any normal hotel, the manager would say, "Sorry, we're full." But the Grand Hotel is a place of infinite possibilities. The manager smiles and says, "Of course we have a room for you." Here's the trick. The manager simply asks every guest to move to the room number that is 1 higher than their current one. The guest in room 1 moves to room 2. The guest in room 2 moves to room 3. The guest in room 99 moves to room 100. The guest in room infinity moves to room infinity plus 1, which is still just infinity. Because the line of rooms is infinite, this shuffling works perfectly. Every guest still has a room, and room 1 is now empty for the new arrival. The hotel was full, but it still accommodated a new guest. Infinity plus 1 is still infinity. Now, let's make it more absurd. A bus pulls up with an infinite number of new guests. Surely the hotel can't handle that. The manager smiles wider and says, "No problem." This time, he asks every current guest to move to the room number that is double their current one. Room 1 moves to room 2. Room 2 moves to room 4. Room 3 moves to room 6. Room 3000 moves to room 6000. This leaves all the odd-numbered rooms, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and so on, empty. And there are an infinite number of odd-numbered rooms. The hotel has accommodated an infinite number of new guests, even though it started full. This paradox reminds me of something my grandmother used to do. She lived through the Great Depression, and she had this magical ability to feed an unlimited number of people with what seemed like a finite amount of food. I remember one Thanksgiving, we were expecting 10 people. My grandmother had prepared accordingly. Then my uncle showed up with 5 unexpected guests. Then my cousin brought her new boyfriend and his brother. Then some neighbors dropped by. By the end of the night, we had 23 people crammed into that tiny dining room. And you know what? Everyone ate. Everyone had a full plate, nobody went hungry. My grandmother just kept dividing things differently. The turkey that was supposed to serve 10 got sliced thinner. The mashed potatoes got stretched with a little more milk. The stuffing became dressing when she moved it to a bigger casserole dish and fluffed it up. She kept making space by reorganizing what was already there. It wasn't actually infinite. Of course it wasn't. But it was the closest thing to the Grand Hotel I've ever witnessed in real life. She understood that scarcity is often a failure of imagination, not a failure of resources. The paradox teaches us that infinity is not just a really, really large number. It's a completely different kind of quantity that breaks all the normal rules of addition and subtraction. In a finite world, full means no room. In an infinite world, full means ready for more.
The lesson is a mind-bending one. The greatest limits in life are the ones we put on ourselves with our finite thinking. When you feel like your life, your resources, or your options are full, remember the Grand Hotel. It shows you that with a little unconventional thinking, you can always make room for more, even when you think you've run out of space. So, infinity breaks all our intuitions about space and capacity. But what about self-reference? What happens when a rule tries to apply to itself? Because the next paradox is so simple a child could understand it, but so profound it almost destroyed the entire foundation of mathematics. Meet the barber who can't shave himself. We return to the world of simple rules that lead to complex contradictions. This paradox was introduced by the brilliant philosopher and mathematician Bertrand Russell, and it's a simpler version of a discovery he made that almost destroyed the foundations of mathematics a century ago. Imagine a small town with a single barber. The barber operates under one single absolute rule. The barber shaves everyone in town who does not shave themselves. The question, of course, is, who shaves the barber? Let's try to put the barber into one of the two groups the rule creates. Group 1, people who shave themselves. Group 2, people who do not shave themselves. If the barber belongs to Group 1, he shaves himself, he violates the rule, because the rule says he should only shave those who do not shave themselves. If the barber belongs to Group 2, he does not shave himself, he violates it once again, because the rule says he must shave everyone who does not shave themselves, including himself. The barber is trapped. He can't follow his own rule without violating it. Russell didn't create this to be a funny story. He created it to show the problem of self-reference in logic. He was looking at the mathematical idea of a set, a collection of objects, like the set of all numbers or the set of all chairs. He asked, what about the set of all sets that do not contain themselves? Does this ultimate set contain itself? If it does, then by its own rule, it shouldn't. If it doesn't, then by its own rule, it must. It's the Barber paradox, but for math. This discovery shook the entire field and led to new, stricter rules for how we talk about collections of things. I once worked for a boss who had an unwritten rule that devastated our entire team's morale. The rule was this: I welcome all feedback, but anyone who criticizes me is clearly being insubordinate and not a team player. Do you see the Barber paradox hidden in there? She created a self-referential rule that made her immune to the very feedback she claimed to want. If you praised her, you were a team player, and your opinion mattered. If you criticized her, you were insubordinate, and your opinion was dismissed. The rule ate itself. It created a world where the only valid feedback was positive feedback, which meant there was no real feedback at all. I watched brilliant people leave that company not because the work was bad, but because they were trapped in a logical loop where improvement was structurally impossible. You couldn't point out a problem because pointing out the problem proved you were the problem. The lesson here is a serious one. Self-referential systems are inherently dangerous. When a rule, a statement, or an institution attempts to define itself or apply to itself, it can create a contradiction that is impossible to solve from the inside. When you're stuck in a no-win scenario like the barber, the only way out is to change the rules of the game, not to try and follow them better. Speaking of impossible situations, what if you were told that something was definitely going to happen, but you'd be completely surprised when it did? Sounds impossible, right? Well, the next paradox proves that trying to predict a surprise is the surest way to guarantee you'll be surprised. Let me show you how a prisoner outwitted himself.
This one is a classic logical puzzle that traps the person trying to use logic to escape. It's a fantastic illustration of how predicting a surprise can actually guarantee the surprise. A prisoner is sentenced to be hanged. The judge tells him this: "You will be hanged at noon on one weekday next week, Monday to Friday, but the execution will be a complete surprise. You won't know the day of the hanging until the executioner arrives at your cell door." The prisoner goes back to his cell and starts to use his logic to figure a way out. The prisoner reasons this way. 1. Can I be hanged on Friday? No. If I'm still alive by the end of Thursday, then I'll know for sure that Friday is the only day left. If I know it, it won't be a surprise. Therefore, Friday is ruled out. 2. Can I be hanged on Thursday? No. Since I've already ruled out Friday, if I'm still alive by the end of Wednesday, I'll know for sure that Thursday is the only day left. If I know it, it won't be a surprise. Therefore, Thursday is ruled out. He continues this same flawless logical process for Wednesday, Tuesday, and Monday. He concludes that a hanging is logically impossible because the judge's two conditions, hanging and surprise, are contradictory. He rests easy, confident in his logic. But then, the executioner shows up on Wednesday at noon. The prisoner is completely surprised, and the judge's promise is fulfilled. How is this possible? The prisoner's logic was perfect. The flaw is that the prisoner used his prediction to negate the possibility of the surprise, which is a key part of the judge's promise. By concluding that the hanging can't happen, the prisoner makes sure that the moment the executioner arrives on any day he ruled out, it will be a total surprise. His attempt to outsmart the system and avoid the surprise is exactly what guarantees the surprise. There's an old saying, "A watched pot never boils." But here's the thing. When you finally give up watching, when you walk away convinced it's not going to boil, when you sit down on the couch and open your laptop, that's exactly when it boils over and makes a mess on your stove. The unexpected hanging is the watched pot principle applied to logic. The prisoner watched so intently, analyzed so thoroughly, convinced himself so completely that it couldn't happen, that when it did happen, it was the most shocking thing imaginable. Your greatest blind spots are created by your most confident predictions. This paradox shows the limit of deductive reasoning when it comes to the future, especially when that future involves uncertainty or the actions of another party. It's a warning against the kind of overthinking and analysis that makes us believe we can fully control or predict a situation. The big takeaway is that not everything can be predicted or controlled. We have to embrace the possibility of the unexpected. Sometimes, the most logical path leads you to the wrong conclusion, and your own confidence in your logic is the very thing that sets you up for the ultimate surprise. Life is filled with surprises. Don't try so hard to rule them out. If logic can trap us and surprise us, what about time itself? What if time isn't the constant universal clock we think it is? What if traveling fast enough could make you age slower than your identical twin? This isn't science fiction. It's science fact, and it's about to blow your mind.
Back to physics. But this one is not a thought experiment. It's a real phenomenon confirmed by science, and it destroys your belief that time is the same for everyone. The scenario involves two identical twin sisters. Twin A stays on Earth, living a normal life. Twin B gets into a super-fast spaceship and travels for a long journey at a speed close to the speed of light. After decades pass on Earth, Twin B returns. The paradox is that when the twins are reunited, the traveling twin, Twin B, is significantly younger than the one who stayed on Earth, Twin A. How can they both experience time differently? Shouldn't they have aged the same? The answer lies in Einstein's theory of special relativity, which states that time is not a constant, it's relative to the observer's speed. This is called time dilation. The faster you move, the slower time passes for you relative to a stationary observer. To twin B on the spaceship, her journey only took a few years. Her biological clock ran slower. To twin A on Earth, her sister's journey took decades because her own clock ran at a normal pace. The paradox part is the confusion. Couldn't twin B argue that she was standing still and twin A was moving away from her at high speed? No, because the symmetry is broken. Twin B had to accelerate, turn around, and decelerate to come back to Earth. It is this change in motion, this acceleration, that makes her the one who experiences the greater time dilation. This is not science fiction. It is a fact. Astronaut Sergei Krikalev spent 803 days aboard the Mir space station and the International Space Station, orbiting Earth at roughly 17,500 miles per hour. When he returned to Earth, physicists calculated that he had aged approximately 0.02 seconds less than he would have if he'd stayed on the ground. It's not much. It's not the decades from the thought experiment, but it's measurable. It's real. Time literally moved slower for him. We even have to account for this effect in our GPS satellites, whose clocks run slightly faster than the ones on Earth because they're moving at high speeds and experiencing weaker gravity. If we didn't constantly adjust them to account for relativistic effects, your GPS would be off by miles in less than a day. Think about that. Every time you use Google Maps to get somewhere, your phone is compensating for the fact that time is relative. The twin paradox is the most profound lesson on the nature of reality. It shows us that time is flexible, not a rigid constant. It's a powerful reminder that where you are and how fast you're moving fundamentally changes your experience of time and reality itself. The person who seeks new experiences, who moves faster and travels further, is literally experiencing time in a different way than the person who stays still. So time bends, space curves, and reality itself is relative. But what if you could bend time so much you could travel backward? What if you could visit the past? Because the next paradox proves why that might be the worst idea you could ever have.
This is the ultimate paradox of time travel, and it attacks the very laws of cause and effect. The scenario is simple. You build a time machine and travel back in time. You find your young grandfather and prevent him from meeting your grandmother. As a result, your mother or father is never born. The ultimate question is, if your parent was never born, then you were never born. If you were never born, how could you have traveled back in time to kill your grandfather? The moment you prevent your own birth, you create a logical contradiction where the cause, your time travel, negates the effect that made the cause possible. It's a self-destruct mechanism for the timeline. This paradox forces scientists and philosophers to come up with ways to make time travel impossible or at least paradox-free. The two main solutions are the self-consistent loop. This theory says you can go back, but the universe will always find a way to prevent you from changing the past. You might try to kill your grandfather, but your gun will jam, or you'll slip on a banana peel, or he'll simply dodge you. Your journey back in time is not a change to the timeline, but an integral part of the timeline that already happened. You are a part of the past, not an agent of change. The parallel universes theory, or branching timelines, says you can change the past, but the moment you do, you don't change your original timeline. Instead, your action splinters off a completely new parallel universe. In that new universe, you were never born. But in your original universe, the one you came from, you still exist. So there is no paradox, just a new contradictory reality being created. I don't have a time machine, but I think about this paradox every time I remember a specific email I sent 7 years ago. I was angry. I was hurt. I was convinced I was right. So I wrote an email to someone I cared about, and I unloaded every grievance, every resentment, every harsh truth I'd been holding back. I hit send before I could reconsider. That email destroyed the relationship. Completely. Permanently. For years, I fantasized about going back in time and stopping myself from sending it. Just delete it from the drafts. Warn past me about the consequences. Save the friendship. But here's the thing the grandfather paradox taught me. If I could go back and stop that email, I would erase all the growth that came from that loss. That broken relationship forced me to look at myself honestly. It forced me to learn how to communicate without weaponizing my words. It forced me to understand that being right is meaningless if you destroy the people you love in the process. If I deleted that email, I would prevent my own emotional birth, the birth of the version of me that learned those lessons. The person who exists today, the one writing this script, only exists because of that painful mistake. The grandfather paradox isn't just about time machines. It's about accepting that your past is non-negotiable because it is the foundation of who you are today. Instead of dwelling on what you cannot change, the real freedom is found in the present, where you can choose which of those parallel universe choices you're going to make for your future. We've explored individual paradoxes, personal traps, logical puzzles, physics phenomena. But what about society? What about the economy? Because the next paradox proves that the most responsible individual choice can become a collective disaster. Let me show you how saving money can destroy the world.
We are all taught that saving money is good. It's a core principle of personal responsibility, right? But the paradox of thrift flips this idea on its head, showing that what is a virtue for the individual can be a total disaster for the entire economy. The paradox, popularized by economist John Maynard Keynes during the Great Depression, goes like this. When you save money, you are spending less. Less spending is good for your personal balance sheet. But when everyone in the entire country or world suddenly decides to save more money at the exact same time, it means that everyone is spending less money. What happens when people stop buying cars, eating out, buying clothes, and taking vacations? Businesses see fewer customers. Demand for goods and services drops. Companies can't make money, so they cut back on production, lay off workers, or close down. The newly unemployed people now have even less money, so they cut their spending even more. The cycle feeds on itself, and the entire economy spirals into a recession. The collective desire to be financially responsible by saving creates a mass problem of unemployment and economic contraction. The paradox is a classic example of the fallacy of composition. What is true for the part is not necessarily true for the whole. Imagine you're at a crowded stadium watching a game. Suddenly, someone yells, "Fire!" The rational, self-preserving thing for you to do is to run toward the exit as fast as possible. That's the smart, individual choice. But if everyone makes that same smart, individual choice at the exact same time, you get a stampede. People get crushed. The exits get jammed. The very behavior that would save you if you were alone becomes the thing that kills you in a crowd. The paradox of thrift is the economic stampede. Your personal choice to save is smart. Everyone's simultaneous choice to save is a disaster. This is why, in a recession, the government often steps in to try and encourage spending and make up for the lack of consumer demand. The lesson is that the impact of saving isn't a moral absolute, it's contextual. In a healthy economy, saving is great because that money becomes investment. But in a struggling economy, too much saving is like everyone collectively hitting the brakes on a moving car. Everything comes to a dangerous, grinding halt. The takeaway is that we don't live in isolation. Our personal financial choices have a collective ripple effect. The goal is not just to be personally secure, but to understand the delicate balance needed for the health of the entire system. Sometimes the most responsible thing you can do for your community is to spend a little and keep the gears turning. If individual virtue can create collective disaster in economics, what about in global security? What happens when the thing that keeps us safest at the highest level makes us most dangerous at the lowest level? Welcome to the nuclear paradox that defined the Cold War.
This paradox comes from the world of international relations, and it explains why the world's biggest powers, like the US and Russia, don't actually fight each other, but they are constantly fighting smaller, local, or proxy wars. The paradox was born during the Cold War, defined by mutually assured destruction, MAD. The core idea: nuclear weapons create an ironclad stability at the highest level, which paradoxically makes the world more dangerous at the lower, local levels. Here's the logic. 1. The US and the Soviet Union both knew that if one launched a nuclear attack, the other would instantly retaliate, leading to the total annihilation of both countries and likely the world. The stakes were too high, so full-scale war between the two superpowers became impossible. This created a high level of global stability. The big guys can't fight. But here's the paradox. Because the big war was off the table, both sides felt emboldened to engage in smaller, more limited aggressions without the fear of it escalating to nuclear war. They knew the line would not be crossed. This led to proxy wars in Vietnam, Korea, and Afghanistan, where the superpowers supported local forces to fight each other indirectly. This created global stability, but immense local instability and violence. The paradox shows how efforts to maintain peace at one level can unintentionally create opportunities for violence at another. It applies far beyond nuclear war. A secure company. A company that becomes too powerful and financially stable might become complacent, allowing small new competitors to innovate and chip away at its market share, creating instability at the grassroots level. A safe relationship. A long-term couple who feels so stable and secure that they stop putting in the effort, leading to small, festering resentments that eventually explode. A dominant sports team. A team so good that the league becomes stable, always the same winner, that fans lose interest and the sport becomes unstable at the economic level. The stability-instability paradox is a warning that true security is a dynamic, constant effort, not a static achievement. When you try to make something too secure or too stable, you often create a breeding ground for localized problems and unexpected chaos. We've seen paradoxes in logic, physics, economics, and geopolitics. But what about the universe itself? What about the most basic observation you make every night? Why is the night sky dark? Sounds like a stupid question, right? Wrong. It's one of the most profound mysteries in all of science, and the answer reveals the age and fate of everything.
This is one of the most beautiful and profound paradoxes, and it questions the very nature of the universe we live in. Just look up on a clear night. You see stars, yes, but you see vast stretches of black, empty space between them. The paradox, named after German astronomer Heinrich Wilhelm Olbers, asks this question. If the universe is infinite, unchanging, and filled with an infinite number of stars, why isn't the entire night sky a brilliant white blaze of light? If the universe were truly infinite and had existed forever, then every single line of sight from Earth should eventually land on the surface of a star. Every single spot in the sky, no matter where you look, should be as bright as the sun. But it's not. It's dark. For centuries, this was a massive, embarrassing mystery for science. Why all the blackness? The solution came in the 20th century with two key discoveries. 1. The universe is not eternal. It has a finite age. The universe is about 13.8 billion years old, based on current estimations. This means that light from stars that are more than 13.8 billion light-years away simply hasn't had enough time to reach us yet. The darkness is the light that is still traveling. The darkness is a measure of the age of the universe. The second discovery is that the universe is expanding. As the universe expands, the light traveling from distant galaxies is stretched out to longer, less energetic wavelengths, a phenomenon called redshift. This stretching can push visible light so far that it moves out of the visible spectrum and into the infrared or radio spectrum, effectively making it invisible to the naked eye. The paradox is solved. The night sky is dark, not because the light isn't there, but because the universe is young and expanding. The darkness, which was the mystery, is actually the single greatest piece of evidence for the Big Bang and the age of the cosmos. 3 months after my father died, I found myself standing in my backyard at 2 a.m., staring up at the stars. I was looking for him, I think, looking for meaning, looking for proof that something continued beyond the darkness. And that's when Olbers' paradox hit me in a way I'd never felt before. The darkness I was staring into, the vast, empty blackness between the stars, wasn't emptiness at all. It was time itself. It was the youth of the universe. It was proof that everything has a beginning, which means everything has a story, which means even endings are part of something larger. My father's life ended, but the light he created, the impact, the love, the lessons, that light is still traveling. It hasn't reached its final destination yet. The people he touched are still carrying that light forward. The darkness isn't absence. The darkness is the space where light is still on its journey. The profound lesson of Olbers' paradox is that what seems like an absence is often a presence in disguise. The darkness isn't empty. It's filled with the story of the universe's birth and its dynamic, mind-blowing expansion. The same goes for the gaps in your own life, the things you feel are missing, or the silence you hear. They aren't nothing. They are often the clearest evidence of how fast you're growing or how far you've come. Speaking of evidence and observation, let's talk about one of the strangest logical paradoxes in all of philosophy. What if I told you that every time you see a green apple, you're actually collecting evidence that all ravens are black? Your brain is about to short circuit.
Get ready for a total mind bender that exposes the difference between formal logic and human intuition. The Raven paradox, created by philosopher Carl Hempel, starts with a simple scientific hypothesis. Hypothesis: all ravens are black. To prove this hypothesis, what would you look for? Naturally, you'd look for black ravens. Every time you see a black raven, it adds a little more proof to your hypothesis. Simple. But in formal logic, a statement is logically equivalent to its contrapositive. It's just another way of saying the same thing. The contrapositive of all ravens are black is, if something is not black, then it is not a raven. Since these two statements are logically the same, any evidence that supports the second statement must also support the first one. Now for the absurd part. What is something that is not black and not a raven? A green apple, a red car, a blue shoe. According to formal logic, every time you see a green apple, you are collecting evidence that all ravens are black. Wait, what? How can looking at a piece of fruit tell you anything about a bird on the other side of the world? The paradox lies in the clash between the cold, hard rules of logic and the fuzzy, intuitive rules of relevance. Logically, the green apple is valid evidence. Intuitively, it's irrelevant. This shows us that logic alone is not enough to understand the world. When we do science, we don't just need a statement to be logically true. We need the evidence to be informative and relevant. A black raven gives you direct, highly informative evidence about ravens. A green apple gives you non-informative, vague evidence about everything that isn't black. I once had a conversation with someone who believed the Earth was flat. I'm not exaggerating, full flat Earth believer. I asked him, what would it take to change your mind? He said, show me the edge. I said, but you can't show me the edge either. You've never seen it. He replied, exactly, and every day I don't see the edge is more evidence that we're being lied to about being able to travel to it. Do you see what he did? He used the Raven paradox in reverse. Every piece of non-evidence, the absence of seeing the edge, became evidence for his claim. Every green apple, every mundane day where nothing extraordinary happened, became proof of the extraordinary conspiracy. This is the dark side of the Raven paradox.
When you divorce logic from relevance, when you allow any observation to count as evidence for any claim, you can prove anything. You can make the absence of evidence become evidence of absence, or worse, evidence of cover-up. The takeaway here is crucial for critical thinking. Question your evidence. If the logic seems to lead you to an absurd conclusion, like a green apple proving the color of a bird, it means your logical method is too broad. We need to be wary of arguments that are technically sound but practically meaningless. The world requires not just airtight logic, but also context, intuition, and a strong sense of relevance. If formal logic can lead us astray, what about self-reference? We've seen how the barber can't shave himself, but what about a puppet whose nose grows when he lies? What happens when Pinocchio says, "My nose will grow right now"? The answer will melt your brain.
We'll continue our exploration of logical paradoxes with a fun one that is a cousin to the liar's paradox, but far more tangible. It's based on the most famous wooden puppet in the world, Pinocchio, whose nose grows every time he tells a lie. The only rule? The nose grows if and only if Pinocchio tells a lie. Now, Pinocchio says a very specific sentence: "My nose will now grow." The question is, will Pinocchio's nose grow? Let's try both possibilities. 1. If his nose grows, it means that what he said, "My nose will now grow," was true. But his nose only grows when he lies. Therefore, his nose should not have grown. Contradiction. 2. If his nose does not grow, it means that what he said, "My nose will now grow," was false, a lie. But his nose grows every time he lies. Therefore, his nose must grow. Contradiction. No matter which way you turn, the logic collapses. His statement is so self-referential, it is a prediction about the consequence of its own truth or falsehood, that it locks his reality into an impossible loop. The Pinocchio paradox is a playful reminder that self-reference breaks logic. You cannot have a truth-testing mechanism, the nose, that is triggered by a statement that is about itself. The visual metaphor, the snake eating its own tail. The ancient symbol of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, is the perfect visual for this paradox. The snake represents a system that is trying to consume itself, to be both the subject and the object, the observer and the observed. It creates a closed loop where there's no beginning and no end, just an eternal, impossible cycle. Pinocchio's statement is the Ouroboros of language, a sentence that tries to be about itself in a way that makes it devour its own meaning. Like the Barber paradox, this is a fun puzzle, but it teaches a serious lesson. Be careful about the rules and beliefs you create for yourself. If your personal rules for success or failure are based on something that refers back to the very act of believing them, for example, "I only succeed if I believe I can succeed," you can create a self-defeating loop. The solution is to keep your beliefs separate from your actions. The nose only grows because it's tied to the statement it's trying to verify. In life, make sure your actions are tied to external, measurable goals, not to the inner, self-referential logic of your own thoughts. We've explored paradoxes of logic, paradoxes of physics, paradoxes of society. But what about business? What about your actual lived experience as a customer? Because the next paradox proves that the best thing that can happen to a company is to completely screw up your order as long as they fix it spectacularly.
Now let's pivot and look at a business and relationship paradox that is highly practical and incredibly powerful. Imagine a simple scenario. You go to your favorite restaurant, and the server messes up your order completely. Normally, this is a bad experience. You leave annoyed. But then the staff steps in and performs a flawless, over-the-top service recovery. They apologize sincerely, replace your meal immediately, comp your drinks, and give you a voucher for a free dinner. The paradox is this. When a service failure is followed by an excellent recovery, the customer often ends up more satisfied and more loyal than if the mistake had never happened at all. This seems counterintuitive. How can a mistake create a better result than a perfect experience? It's all about emotional contrast and exceeding lowered expectations. 1. Lowered expectations. When the mistake happens, your expectations for the business drop to zero. You expect an excuse, a delay, or a fight. 2. Exceeded expectations. When the business goes above and beyond, not just fixing the mistake, but doing something extra, it creates a huge surge of surprise and delight. This emotional high is greater than the steady, neutral satisfaction of a perfect expected meal. 3. Trust building. The recovery demonstrates that the company is accountable and willing to fight for your business. This builds a deep, lasting trust that a perfect transaction never could. You now know that even if things go wrong, they will make it right. Let me tell you about December 23, 2019. I was flying home for Christmas, and my flight got canceled due to weather. Not delayed, canceled. The airline put me on standby for the next available flight, which was December 26th. I was going to miss Christmas with my family. I was devastated. I went to the counter, and I'll be honest, I was not kind. I was frustrated, angry, and I took it out on the gate agent. And that gate agent, instead of getting defensive, looked me in the eye and said, "Give me 10 minutes." She got on the phone, she called other airlines, she rerouted me through 2 connecting cities, she personally escorted me to the other terminal, she upgraded me to first class on the final leg, and she gave me a handwritten note that said, "Merry Christmas. We're sorry we almost ruined it." I made it home at 11 p.m. on Christmas Eve. That airline didn't just fix a problem, they performed a miracle. And I've been loyal to them ever since, not because they never make mistakes, but because I know that when they do, they'll move heaven and earth to make it right. That's the service recovery paradox in action. The lesson here is not to intentionally make mistakes. That would be a disaster if you couldn't pull off the recovery. The lesson is that failure is an inevitable part of every complex system, whether it's a restaurant, a business, or a relationship. The true test of character, loyalty, and strength is not avoiding failure, but how you respond to it with integrity and generosity. So failure can be an opportunity if you handle it right. But what about surviving the unsurvivable? What about enduring years of torture, isolation, and suffering? Because the next paradox, told by a prisoner of war, reveals the most important psychological truth about resilience. The optimists died first.
This is perhaps the most important paradox for personal resilience and leadership. It's named after Admiral James Stockdale, the highest-ranking American prisoner of war in the notorious Hanoi Hilton during the Vietnam War, where he spent over 7 years enduring brutal torture and isolation. When asked how he survived and who didn't, his answer revealed the paradox. "I never lost faith in the end of the story, that I would prevail and get out. And I never confused that faith with the discipline necessary to confront the most brutal facts of my current reality, whatever they might be." Stockdale noted that the optimists were the ones who broke down and died. They were the ones who said, "We'll be out by Christmas." And Christmas would come, and Christmas would go. Then they'd say, "We'll be out by Easter," and Easter would come, and Easter would go. And then Thanksgiving, and then it would be Christmas again. And they died of a broken heart. The Stockdale paradox is the ability to hold 2 seemingly contradictory ideas in your mind at the exact same time. 1. Unwavering faith in the outcome. You will prevail. 2. Unflinching realism about the present. You must confront the brutal facts right now. Blind optimism, the belief that everything will be fine without any basis, is a trap that leads to despair when reality inevitably fails to meet a self-imposed, unrealistic deadline. Pure pessimism, the focus only on the brutal facts, is also a trap, as it robs you of the will to fight. The paradox is the balance. It's the difference between saying, "Optimist, the company will be fine, no need to worry," ignoring the brutal facts. Pessimist, "The company's going under, we should just quit," losing faith in the end. Stockdale,
This is going to be incredibly hard. We might lose 80% of our clients in the next year. Brutal facts. But we will find a way to survive and thrive because we are the best team. Unwavering faith. In 2020, I came very close to giving up on everything I'd been building. The pandemic hit, my income disappeared overnight, my savings were draining, and I couldn't see a path forward. I had two voices in my head. One said, just be positive, everything will work out. The other said, face it, you failed, it's over. Both voices were trying to kill me in different ways. It wasn't until I read about the Stockdale paradox that I found the third voice, the one that said, this is going to be the hardest year of your life. You might lose everything you've built. You will have to make the painful sacrifices and work harder than you ever have. And you will make it through this. You will find a way. That voice saved me. It gave me permission to acknowledge how bad things were without giving up the belief that I could survive. It let me make the brutal decisions, cutting costs, pivoting my business model, asking for help, while maintaining the deep-seated belief that those tough decisions would eventually lead to my victory. And they did. Not because I was blindly optimistic, not because I was pessimistically resigned, but because I held both truths at once. This is the mindset of true resilience. It's not about avoiding pain. It's about enduring it with purpose. It allows you to make the hard, painful, and realistic decisions, the brutal facts, without giving up the deep-seated belief that those tough decisions will eventually lead to your victory, the unwavering faith. The lesson is for anyone facing a long, hard challenge. Face the worst-case scenario with an honest, sober, clear mind, but never lose the belief that you will make it through to the other side. We've looked at paradoxes on Earth, in our minds, in our societies, but now it's time to zoom out, way out, to the biggest paradox of all. If the universe is infinite and ancient and filled with billions of galaxies, each with billions of planets, where is everybody? Why haven't we found a single alien civilization? The answer might be the most terrifying thing you'll hear today.
We'll end our long journey with the biggest paradox of all, one that spans the entire universe. The premise is based on statistics. The universe is ancient, 13.8 billion years old. It contains hundreds of billions of galaxies. Each galaxy has hundreds of billions of stars. Many of those stars have planets, billions of them in our galaxy alone. Given the sheer number of stars and planets, the odds of intelligent, life-supporting planets evolving are astronomically high. So the question, first asked by physicist Enrico Fermi in 1950, is, if the universe is so vast and so old, and life is so likely, where is everybody? Why have we found no evidence of aliens, no signals, no spacecraft, and no megastructures? The great silence is the paradox. The math says they should be everywhere, but the observation is that they are nowhere. This contradiction has led to some of the most fascinating and terrifying possible explanations. The rare Earth hypothesis. We are a cosmic fluke. The leap from simple life to complex, intelligent life is so improbable that it has only happened once here on Earth. We are unique. They are too far away. Even at the speed of light, the distances are too vast. Their signals simply haven't reached us yet, or we're not listening for the right type of communication. The zoo hypothesis. They know we're here, but they are deliberately avoiding contact, treating Earth as a protected national park or a zoo exhibit, observing us until we reach a certain level of maturity. They existed and died. Civilizations rise and fall on timescales so vast that we simply missed them. We're looking at the cosmic equivalent of an empty theater after the show has ended. The Great Filter, the terrifying one. This is the most chilling explanation. There is a universal filter, a point of extreme difficulty that almost all advanced life fails to pass. This filter is what prevents life from becoming a galaxy-spanning civilization. It could be behind us, meaning we passed a ridiculously hard early test, like the jump from single-celled to complex life, and we are the few who made it.
Or it could be ahead of us, meaning every civilization eventually invents something that causes its own destruction, like a supervirus, a nuclear war, an ecological collapse, or a runaway AI, before it can colonize the galaxy. If the Great Filter is ahead of us, the silence of the night sky isn't a sign that we are alone, it's a warning. It means the reason we haven't found other civilizations is because they all destroyed themselves when they reached our current level of technology, and we are next. Imagine you're driving on a highway that stretches forever in both directions. The road is perfect, smooth, well lit, clearly marked. It's designed for millions of travelers. But as you drive, hour after hour, you see no other cars, no other travelers, no signs of anyone else who has ever used this road. Two possibilities. Either you're the first person to ever discover this highway, or everyone who drove it before you crashed and burned before they reached the end. That's the Fermi paradox. The universe is the highway we're driving, and we're starting to realize we might be alone in a disturbing way. The Fermi paradox is the ultimate challenge to our ego. It forces us to confront the possibility that the universe is either so empty that we are completely alone, or so dangerous that every other civilization has been wiped out. The lesson here is existential. If we are alone, the future of all intelligent life rests on us, and we must protect this planet at all costs. If we are not alone, the silence is a terrifying incentive to solve our own existential problems like climate change, war, disease, artificial intelligence, before the Great Filter wipes us out. The darkness of the night sky is not a gap, it's a canvas for our greatest responsibility.
We began this journey by saying that life is not a straight line, but a complex, confusing loop. We proved that two opposites can be true at once. You can be perfectly safe at the top and in danger at the bottom. You can be better off because a business failed you. You can save yourself by staring at the worst possible outcome while never losing faith. You can literally age at a different rate than your own twin. You can find happiness only by stopping your attempt to find it. You can be trapped by rules designed to sound fair. You can make the world worse by doing the individually right thing. Your friends are mathematically more popular than you. Labels and categories break down under scrutiny. Identity persists through total change. A green apple can technically prove a raven is black. A hotel with infinite rooms that's completely full still has room for more. Your past cannot be changed because it created the you who wants to change it. Every one of these paradoxes is a mirror reflecting the absurd, complicated, and often contradictory nature of reality. They are not problems to be solved. They are truths to be accepted. The moment you stop fighting the paradox, the moment you accept that saving money can be bad for the world, that more choices can be bad for you, or that a green apple can technically prove a bird is black, you step out of the logical trap. You free your mind from the simple A to B thinking that holds most people back. The real power comes when you realize that life's biggest questions don't have single answers. They have paradoxes. And the winning strategy isn't to pick one side. It's to hold both sides simultaneously. Be ambitious and content. Plan for the future and live in the present. Be confident and humble. Face brutal reality and maintain unwavering faith. The next time you're faced with a hard choice, a frustration, or an unsolvable problem, stop looking for the single clear answer. Instead, ask yourself, what is the paradox here? Because the winning move is often found in the uncomfortable truth that the opposite of your current belief is also correct. These paradoxes aren't just mental puzzles, they're life instructions written in the language of contradiction. They teach us that absolute statements are dangerous, that systems can trap you with their own rules, that what you chase directly runs away. More options can mean less satisfaction. Your perception is skewed by network effects. Language and labels are imprecise. Identity is process, not material. Reality itself is observer-dependent. Infinity breaks all normal rules. Self-reference creates impossible loops. Prediction can guarantee surprise. Time is relative to motion. Your past is unchangeable because it created your present. Individual virtue can create collective disaster. Safety at one level creates danger at another. Absence can be presence. Logic needs relevance to be meaningful.
Failure can build more loyalty than perfection. Hope without realism is deadly, but so is realism without hope. Silence might be the universe's warning. You now have a toolkit of paradoxes, a new lens through which to view every confusing situation in your life. When your boss gives you contradictory instructions, that's a catch-22. When you're paralyzed by too many options, that's the paradox of choice. When you're trying too hard to be happy, that's the hedonism paradox. When everyone is saving money but the economy is collapsing, that's the paradox of thrift. When you feel inferior to your friends on social media, remember the friendship paradox. These aren't just abstract concepts, they're the hidden architecture of reality. You've seen the impossible. You now know that the world is much weirder and more wonderful than simple logic allows, and that's exactly where the real opportunities lie. The paradoxes we've explored today have broken your brain, but they've also rebuilt it stronger. You're now equipped to see the loops, the traps, the contradictions that most people miss. You can spot when someone is using absolute language to shut down nuance. You can recognize when a system is designed to keep you stuck. You can understand why you feel anxious with too many choices, why happiness comes when you stop chasing it, and why the smartest move is sometimes to hold two opposite beliefs at once. Life is not a puzzle with one correct solution. It's a paradox with infinite interpretations. And the wisest people, the ones who survive the unsurvivable, who build the unbreakable, who find joy in the chaos, are the ones who learn to dance in the contradiction instead of fighting it. So the next time someone tells you that something is always true or never possible, remember the sword and shield. When you're stuck between two impossible choices, remember the crocodile. When you're overwhelmed by options, remember that satisficing beats maximizing. When you feel left behind, remember that your friends are mathematically more connected. It's not you, it's the network. And when you look up at the night sky and see all that darkness between the stars, remember that the darkness is not emptiness. It's the story of time itself, still unfolding. The paradoxes have shown you that reality is fluid, logic is limited, and the only constant is change. Your job now is to embrace the contradiction, to live in the gray area, to understand that the most profound truths are the ones that don't make sense until you stop trying to make them make sense.
If this video broke your brain and helped you see the world in a new way, if you're sitting there right now with your mind expanded and your assumptions shattered, then you need to watch this next video right here, where we explore the single most dangerous idea in philosophy, the one thought that, once you think it, you can never unthink. Click now before the algorithm decides you've seen enough truth for one day.